Seven Signs You're Finally Healing from Complex Trauma, Gabor Maté inspired. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that belongs only to people who grew up having to manage the emotional weather of the adults around them. It is not the tiredness of a long day at work. It is the deep cellular fatigue, the kind that makes your bones feel heavy before you have even spoken a word. You're exhausted because for as long as you can remember, you have been operating as an emotional radar system. You learn to walk into a room and instantly calculate the mood. You learn to shrink when someone was angry, to perform when someone was sad, and to disappear when someone was overwhelmed. You became a master of reading the unspoken rules of survival, and you did it so well that you forgot you were doing it. You thought this was just who you were, a highly sensitive person, an empath, a peacemaker. But then something shifts. You reach a point in your life where the radar starts to malfunction, not because it is broken, but because it is no longer needed. You start to experience strange, confusing reactions to ordinary life. You feel sudden waves of grief. You lose interest in people you used to chase. You feel a terrifying emptiness when things are finally calm. If you are experiencing this right now, you might think you are losing your mind. You might think you are regressing. But according to the psychological framework of Dr. Gabor Maté, you are not falling apart. You are waking up. What you are experiencing are the unmistakable signs that your nervous system is finally standing down from a war that ended decades ago. We need to reframe how we understand complex trauma. When most people hear the word trauma, they think of a single catastrophic event, a car crash, a natural disaster, a sudden loss. But Dr. Gabor Maté points out that the most pervasive form of trauma is often invisible. It is not what happened to you in a single moment. It is what did not happen for you over 1,000 moments. Complex trauma is the chronic absence of emotional safety. It is the parent who is physically present but emotionally vacant. It is the environment where love was conditional, where your needs were treated as burdens, and where you learned that your authentic self was a threat to your attachment. Mate defines trauma not as the external event, but as the internal disconnection that occurs when a child is forced to suppress their authenticity to maintain their attachment. You had to cut off parts of yourself to survive. You built an adaptive self, a brilliant, highly functional armor that kept you safe in an unsafe world. But armor is heavy, and eventually the body demands to take it off. Healing from complex trauma is not about fixing something that is broken. It is about unlearning the survival strategies that are no longer serving you. It is the slow, often disorienting process of returning to the person you were before the world told you it was not safe to be them. And when that process begins, it does not look like a sudden burst of joy. It looks like a series of profound, sometimes uncomfortable shifts. Here are the 7 signs that you are finally healing from complex trauma. The first sign is that you become terrified of peace. For most of your life, chaos was your baseline. You grew up in an environment where the other shoe was always about to drop. Because of this, your nervous system wired itself to expect danger. Hypervigilance became your default state. So when you finally enter a season of life where things are stable, where a partner is consistent, where your environment is safe, you do not feel relieved. You feel panicked. Your mind starts searching for the threat. You might pick a fight just to create the familiar tension. You might self-sabotage a good opportunity because the calm feels like a trap. This is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign of nervous system recalibration. According to trauma-informed psychology, when a body that is used to running finally stops, the sudden stillness feels like a threat. Your brain is confusing peace with the silence that used to precede a storm. Feeling terrified of peace means you're experiencing safety for the first time, and your body is simply learning a new language. The second sign is that you stop trying to heal the people who hurt you. In complex trauma, children often take on the role of the caretaker. If a parent was emotionally dysregulated, the child learned to soothe them. You learned that if you could just fix their pain, you would finally be safe. You carried this into adulthood, attracting broken people, hoping that if you could just love them enough, they would change. And in doing so, they would finally give you the love you were denied. But as you heal, a quiet boundary forms. You look at the chaotic, unhealed people in your life, and for the first time, you do not feel the urge to rescue them. You feel a deep, protective exhaustion. You realize that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. This is not a loss of empathy, it is the reclamation of your own energy. You're finally redirecting the fierce, devoted care you have always given to others back toward yourself. The third sign is the arrival of a sudden, unnameable grief. This is the sign that catches most people off guard. You are doing the work, you are setting boundaries, you are in a safer place than you have ever been. And suddenly, you're hit by a wave of sorrow so heavy it brings you to your knees. You cry over a commercial. You feel a profound ache when you see a parent gently holding their child's hand. You mourn for things you cannot even articulate. From a trauma-informed perspective, this grief is not a symptom of depression. It is the thawing of a frozen nervous system. When you were a child, you could not afford to grieve the emotional neglect you were experiencing. Grief requires a safe container, and you did not have one. So you numbed it. You pushed it down into your body so you could keep functioning. Now that you are safe, the ice is melting. The grief is arriving because your body finally trusts you enough to feel it. This pain is not a regression, it is the exact mechanism of your liberation. You are mourning the childhood you deserved but did not get, and in doing so, you're finally giving that inner child the witness they always needed. The fourth sign is that you lose your appetite for chaotic relationships. People with complex trauma often confuse anxiety with chemistry. When you meet someone who's emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or unpredictable, your nervous system lights up. The intermittent reinforcement, the breadcrumbs of affection followed by withdrawal, feels like passion. It feels like home. But as you heal, something remarkable happens. The sparks stop feeling exciting and they start feeling exhausting. You go on a date with someone who's volatile, and instead of feeling drawn in, you feel a quiet, firm desire to leave. You start to find drama incredibly boring. Dr. Gabor Mate's work highlights that we are drawn to what is familiar, not necessarily what is good for us. When you lose your tolerance for chaos, it means your nervous system is no longer seeking out the familiar pain of your past. You are beginning to recognize that love is not supposed to be a battlefield. You're choosing the quiet dignity of secure attachment over the loud rush of a trauma bond. The fifth sign is that your body stops bracing for impact. Complex trauma lives in the fascia, the muscles, the jaw, the shoulders. For years, you have walked through the world physically braced, as if you are constantly preparing to be yelled at, criticized, or abandoned. You hold your breath when someone calls your name. You flinch at sudden movements. But as you move through healing, you start to notice moments of physical unclenching. You catch yourself taking a deep, full breath into your belly, something you haven't done since you were a toddler. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw relaxes. You realize you have been sitting in a room for an hour without scanning the exits. This is the somatic reality of healing. The mind can understand trauma intellectually for years, but the body only heals when it experiences undeniable, repeated proof of safety. These moments of physical relaxation are your nervous system whispering, we are no longer in danger. The sixth sign is that you stop waiting for an apology that is never going to come. One of the most persistent fantasies in complex trauma recovery is the hope for closure from the people who caused the wound. You rehearse conversations in the shower. You write letters you never send. You harbor a quiet, desperate hope that one day they will finally see what they did to you. They will understand and they will say they are sorry. Healing reaches a critical threshold when you let go of this fantasy. You accept with a heavy but clear heart that they may never understand, they may never take accountability, and you realize that your healing does not require their participation. This is what psychologists call radical acceptance. It is the moment you stop outsourcing your validation to the very people who broke you. You become your own witness. You look at your own history and say, I see what happened, I know it was wrong, and I believe myself. That is the ultimate reclamation of your reality. The seventh sign is the deepest one. It is the one most people refuse to see in themselves because it feels like a step backward. You begin to feel a strange, quiet emptiness. For your entire life, your identity was built around survival. You were the fixer, the overachiever, the people pleaser, the strong one. Your adaptive self gave you a purpose. It gave you a script to follow. But as you heal, as you stop performing and stop managing everyone else's emotions, the script runs out. You wake up one day and realize you do not know who you are when you are not surviving. You look at your life and feel a vast, echoing space. Your mind will tell you this is depression. It will tell you that you have lost your spark. But according to Mate's framework, this emptiness is not a void, it is a clearing. The adaptive self is dissolving, and the authentic self has not yet fully emerged. You are in a sacred space between who you had to be and who you actually are. This emptiness is the prerequisite for a real life. You cannot fill your life with your own truth until you have emptied it of the survival strategies that were never yours to begin with. If you recognize yourself in these signs, there is something you need to hear, and you need to let it bypass the critical voice in your head that is always looking for a flaw. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were a child who was placed in an impossible environment, and you performed a miracle. You adapted. You built a psychological fortress out of nothing but your own intuition and will to survive. The people-pleasing, the hypervigilance, the emotional numbing, the anxiety, these were not character defects. They were acts of profound biological intelligence. They kept you alive. But the war is over. The environment has changed. And the armor that once protected you is now the very thing keeping you from the life you deserve. Taking it off is terrifying. It leaves you feeling exposed, raw, and deeply vulnerable. But it is the only way to feel the sun on your skin again. Healing from complex trauma is not a linear journey. There is no magical morning where you wake up and realize all your triggers are gone. Healing is a daily practice of noticing. It is catching yourself when you start to shrink and gently choosing to take up space. It is feeling the urge to run from peace and choosing to stay for 5 more minutes. It is looking at the grief in your chest and saying, I have room for you now. You do not have to do it perfectly. You will fall back into old patterns. You will people please. You will brace for impact. And when you do, the practice is simply to offer yourself the compassion you were denied as a child. You become the safe container you never had. The goal is not to become a flawless, enlightened being who never feels pain. The goal is to become real, to live a life that is entirely your own, driven by your own values, your own desires, and your own authentic voice. The best chapter of your life does not begin when the pain completely disappears. It begins the moment you stop letting the pain make your decisions. It begins when you realize that the child who had to hide is now an adult who has the power to be seen. If this reflection feels like a mirror to your own experience, consider subscribing so we can continue to explore the deep, often unspoken realities of psychological healing together. I want to ask you, which of these 7 signs have you noticed showing up in your own life recently? Which one feels the most true to where you are right now? Leave it in the comments below. Sometimes simply naming your experience in the presence of others is the first step in breaking the isolation of trauma. I will leave you with this thought. The authentic self was never destroyed by what happened to you. It simply went into hiding. waiting for the day it would be safe to return. The exhaustion you feel, the grief, the shifting boundaries, the quiet emptiness, these are not signs that you are losing yourself. They are the sound of your true self finally coming home. Healing from complex trauma is not about becoming someone new, but about unlearning the survival strategies that kept you hidden. Which of the 7 signs in this video resonates most deeply with your current experience? The panic of peace. You are not broken. The trauma is thawing. What does it actually mean to heal from complex trauma? Unlike single event trauma, complex trauma stems from chronic emotional neglect, conditional love, and environments where authenticity was unsafe. Inspired by the profound psychological work of Dr. Gabor Maté, this documentary explores the 7 subtle, often misunderstood signs that your nervous system is finally standing down from survival mode. From the terrifying arrival of peace and the sudden waves of delayed grief, to the dissolution of the adaptive self and the loss of appetite for chaotic relationships, we map the journey from trauma bonding to authentic living. Drawing on attachment theory, somatic psychology, and nervous system regulation, this video offers a compassionate reframe for anyone who feels exhausted by their own healing journey. You are not broken. You're adapting to safety. If you are ready to stop managing your life and start living it, this video is for you.